You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Since its inception, Amazon Web Services, AWS, has been the best place for customers to build and run open source software in the cloud. AWS is proud to support open source projects, foundations, and partners.
Hey everyone, today we are talking about MapLibre, an open source project, and today joining me to discuss its current state, the developments that come with it, what I'm understanding is a pretty large open source project, are two senior engineers from Amazon Web Services. We have Tarus Balog, who's a principal technical strategist of open source at Amazon Web Services, and Seth Fitzsimmons, principal engineer at AWS. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. So, Seth, MapLibre, can you tell me the story about its roots, what makes it unique, and how those roots are reflected today?
Sure. So MapLibre is interesting because it is an example of a single vendor open source project that wasn't intended to be a single vendor open source project. About 10 plus years ago, Mapbox created a rendering engine to display maps on the web that used WebGL for high performance. So you could have complex vector maps that change as you use them, which means that you can change the labeling, you can add overlays, you can change the colors of things very quickly. And they built it as part of their initial project. And there was a lot of open source development at Mapbox at the time. Over the years, they discovered that map rendering is a very complex area. It's the intersection of geospatial and real-time rendering. So you can come to it from 3D gaming, but you miss a lot of the nuance involved in the geospatial side. If you come at it from the geospatial side, the real-time aspect of 3D rendering is a lot more complicated. So it required a group of core contributors that had a lot of expertise, and they ended up being employed by Mapbox. Mapbox did tremendous work with it over the years. They made it available for use with their platform, but also for use with anything else. And I was a very happy user of it when I was back working as a consultant. In 2020, Mapbox announced that it was going to close source both the JavaScript version and the native versions. And what they did there is they upgraded the rendering engines to support some new capabilities and some new underlying technology. And they changed the license as well and required it to be used with the Mapbox service. Because it had this heritage of people using it outside of the Mapbox product, there were a lot of people that were fairly disappointed by this and wanted to do something about it. And there was a group of 3 people in particular. One was at Stadia Maps, another was at MapTiler. Both of them are other map providers, and another has been at Wikimedia, and I forgot where he was at the time, but he did this mostly as a personal project. They said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to fork the JavaScript version because we see a lot of value in this, and we want to make sure that it continues to exist for people to work with. And that means that we're going to need to do some evolution of it. We're going to need to modernize it, but we're going to make sure that it's open. And that was really the origin of it. Over the last 4 years, there's been a lot of corporate support in addition to a lot of community support. This is another interesting one where all of the information about MapLibre that's current today, anything about Mapbox GL that exists on Stack Overflow or anything like that also applies to it with some slight modernization. So there's a lot of community that existed that now kind of got split there. But the corporate involvement helped with the sustainability and to keep it to keep a through line, to keep it usable by organizations that were not using Mapbox.
So can you quickly tell me again why exactly they decided to make it proprietary and not continue with the open source project? What was that again?
I understand that was a business decision on Mapbox.
Okay. So Tarus, I'm curious from your perspective, because you worked a lot on open source projects. How How is MapLibre unique to you?
So whenever there's a fork, and this is what MapLibre is, I think there's a failure. Like you've built this community, you built this thing, and for whatever reasons, I mean, if you own the copyright, if you've been putting the code together, it's up to you to determine how you want to proceed with your business. But forking to me it should always be a last resort. But one of the issues is when you do fork, it's very, very hard to maintain momentum and have a successful fork. And this is exactly what happened here. So on December 8th of 2020, Mapbox changed the license with respect to the JavaScript. They did their entire product, but they had previously gotten rid of the native or the SDK version a couple months earlier than that. But they changed the version on the JavaScript, and like 5 people immediately said, I'm going to fork it. And that happens a lot. Everyone's going to say, I'm going to fork it, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. What was really unique about MapLibre is these 5 people kind of coalesced and came together, and they said, okay, let's just all work together, even though we have different interests and stuff like this. Let's work together. So they founded MapLibre, and what was funny to me was 3 days. So on December 11th, you can go into the GitHub issues. I think it's issue 25. A man named Yuri is like, hey, we've been thinking about this for a while. Why don't we switch to TypeScript instead of JavaScript? And if you go through, it's like, why? And some people are going and say, well, look, it's easier to debug. It's got better tools.
Yeah.
It's very similar to JavaScript, but so we should do this. And what I love about this is there was one man who wrote up. He says, yeah, I think they're similar enough that they couldn't confuse developers. And by the way, here's a pull request. And he just started down this path, and it took him 9 months. But 9 months later, in September of 2021, the MapLibre GL product, even though it's still called MapLibre GL JS, was a TypeScript product. It was 500 plus files changed, everything like this. And you just don't see that. You just don't see someone in the community who has no real financial interest. He wasn't paid to do this. But now that when you run an open source business, and I've run an open source business in the past, you always have to judge, will this change make it hard? Say my core business is support. Someone may come in and say, here's a great change. And they're like, yeah, but this will kill my support business if I do this. I may not have TypeScript experts, so I may not have this. So to see the community to get this little level of freedom and actually at that point in time, going in a different direction than the original project would have gone. I thought that was really cool.
So what would you all say about the general state of MapLibre today, and what makes it relevant for Amazon Web Services?
So I think it's gotten to a point of health. There was a lot of chop wood, carry water work that needed to be done early. Setting up continuous integration, setting up improved unit testing framework, a lot of technical migrations that had been overdue, that I believe have been done in the closed source Mapbox product, but needed to be done in the open. That has largely been done at this point. And that's been, a lot of that has been done by individuals in the community, but it's also been done through the efforts of corporate sponsors, AWS being one of them. So we launched Amazon Location Service back in 2020 as well. That's AWS's map location-based service offering. So offering maps, place-based search, routing, things like that. And we wanted to take an open source approach to the rendering engine because we knew that there was an existing community, and we wanted them to be able to continue to use the tools that they were using before, but to be able to take advantage of AWS capabilities. So we got involved in the project. I remember Yuri coming up to me at State of the Map in Tucson, saying, "Hey, our project maintainer, our informal project maintainer is finishing up his PhD, and he needs a job. We should find a way to pay him." So that was the beginning of the sponsorship program, where Yuri was going around looking to raise money to be able to support Oliver, to be able to handle the project. And having him in place has been absolutely crucial for us in particular, because it's given us someone within the project, and this is expanded beyond that. There are now, I believe, 2 or 3 maintainers plus some other staff that are employed by the MapLibre project itself. It gives us someone to hand off work that we've done, and it also gives us a little bit clearer of an opportunity to provide feedback about the direction we want to go in. There's an advisory board that exists within this that's got the corporate sponsors where they can provide some input. Like, everybody is equal. It's just that we've given some money so they listen to us and put things in issues. So we don't necessarily do that. So we don't get any special treatment, but we do have somebody to talk to, the same as everyone else does.
And what's nice about this sponsorship is you actually have people like Harel was the man who did the TypeScript migration. He is the JavaScript maintainer now, and he gets paid to maintain this. So if we come in with a question, there's actually someone who's doing this as their job. It's not they're doing it on nights and weekends. And because of the structure of this organization, there are people who are paid, and this is purely out of sponsorships. They are paid to work full-time on Map. Well, I won't say full-time, but they are a considerable amount of time on MapLibre, and it adds to the stability. At Amazon, we feel a lot more comfortable about using this library because we know that there's a certain level of professionalism around it. I mean, and when I say professional, it's the same thing between an amateur and a professional athlete. Are you getting paid? And so if you're doing open source professionally, you're getting paid to do open source. And being able to have a structure in place that allows that to happen, I think, is key to the success of this project.
Yeah, we're not the only beneficiaries of that. Anybody in the community who wants to use it is going to get better response times because they're not reliant on somebody working on nights and weekends.
When talking about MapLibre, it actually has a lot of different components. And one of those is MapLibre Native. And it has a story behind it that I'd love to hear from y'all.
So that was a project that was created again by Mapbox to achieve some level of parity with the WebGL version. It shares a lot of the same shaders, but all of the other rendering code is totally different. And that is also from approximately 10 years ago. So it was built on OpenGL, particularly within the iOS world. I feel like I talked about this way too much. Apple announced their intention to deprecate OpenGL several years ago. So it's one of those things that we keep waiting. Okay, when are they going to start removing it from the next iOS release in the fall? So the writing's been on the wall for a number of years, where MapLibre has needed to migrate to a modern rendering framework, in this case, Metal. So that was something that before we could really move forward with features and performance, we had to take care of that one particular piece of technical debt. And I'm really happy that we launched support for Metal back in January of this year. And that was another fun project because AWS worked on it. We had a couple of different contracting firms that were working on it that had different expertise in different areas. We were working with an engineer at Meta. We were working with another engineer at Grab. And then we were also getting feedback from the community on things that were important to them. And we did it as a multi-stage design build process that took a lot longer than it might have had you done it internally within a company. But I think as a result of that, we got a lot more community buy-in in terms of the approach that we took to it. And another big goal there was to do as much as we could to educate the community on the changes so that they could take ownership over it in the future. The reality is that the team that did that Metal implementation continues to exist. It's coming on 2 years, I think, now. And we think of them, and by we, I wear both my AWS and my open source community hat. We think of them as the MapLibre mobile team, or the MapLibre native team. And we're working on some additional technology migrations like Vulkan for Android, which opens up the ability to run it in a car, for example.
Tarus, what strikes you about the MapLibre community?
Oh, one of the main things is transparency. So in order to deal with some of the administration aspects of a project, they they host on the Open Source Collective website. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but it helps people kind of manage open source finances. And so you can go and actually look at the checking account for the MapLibre organization, and you can see every donation, including the big ones from companies like Amazon and Meta and Microsoft, and then the $15 and $10 ones. And so the fact that everything's done, they have a monthly call on Zoom, and everyone's welcome. They advertise it on their discussion channel, and you can basically, anyone can contribute. And when Seth was talking about the metal migration that AWS sponsored, even though we sponsored it, we had had an external team who worked on it as well, and they did a large portion of the development. That was managed by a guy named Steve at Wet Dog Weather, who was a big contributor to the project. And so, I mean, name another project where companies like Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft are all involved for the common good. And all kind of
Foundation, the Overture Foundation. Yeah.
So I'm very focused. So Seth is very map oriented, and he deals with Overture maps as well, and I'm much more MapLibre focused. But it's one of the overwhelming things for me is the fact that when we talk about open source, we talk about being open, and we talk about the meritocracy, and there are often political aspects of open source that come into play that doesn't make it work, or you end up with one or two people. I mean, we talked about, so you've got the JavaScript/TypeScript library. The native library was actually an SDK of a company called MapTyler. There's a guy named Peter Pradal, who's on the board of MapLibre. They had actually started working on their own fork prior to MapLibre coming around by about 6 months. And as soon as it happened, they contributed all. They contributed all to the project. And so, and now there's even talk, there's a MapLibre-RS project, which is, wait for it, Rust.
Oh,
so
yes.
One of the things that people want to do is they have a C++ library that's MapLibre native.
Yeah.
The JS is TypeScript. What they want to do is they want to create a common code base in Rust, and then use WASM WebAssembly for the web side, and then Rust natively on all the other operating systems.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, how it is, and it's like, to watch this project evolve. I mean, one of the big things we're dealing with is maps. As they get more and more detailed and more involved, they get bigger. The tiles get bigger. The amount of information you're trying to do is get bigger, and you get a performance hit if you're trying to manage a lot of tiles. Now, most of the maps used use a tile format invented by Mapbox. Well, MapLibre is working on a MapLibre tile format, which is going to be more performant. There are people at Mapbox who are interested in getting involved in that aspect of the project because they could benefit from it. And it's like, the code base is December 2020. So the code base is split about 4 years ago. They're literally different projects now. Mapbox has their market and where they fit in. MapLibre has its market and where they fit in. And they've finally come to this thing. It's like, yeah, we could use improved tile format. So why don't we help contribute along with Microsoft and Amazon and Meta to making this happen? And it gives me goosebumps. I'm literally got goosebumps right here thinking about, having a company that someone forked to their product, still wanting to be involved, because it was if you look at some of Yuri's comments at the very beginning of the fork, it was very amicable. It's like, okay, we understand you've made this decision. I hope you'll understand that as an open source community, we can't be involved because it's not open source anymore. But there wasn't the animosity that you see in a lot of these forks. And that tickles me. That literally tickles me.
We got about 5 minutes left. I'm curious about the data that just is increasing by volume, I think, across the web within applications. And clearly we've seen the use of GPUs to, for acceleration purposes, and performance is as much an issue today as it has ever been. What's going on with MapLibre in this capacity in terms of data management and performance?
So a big one is the MapLibre tile format initiative that Tarus talked about. That's taking advantage of zero copy structures so that you can move things from the network into memory onto the GPU without having to change them around. And that's going to speed things up a bunch. The other evolution that we've seen over the last few years is some more focused rendering frameworks. There's one that came out of Uber a number of years ago called Deck.gl. And that was originally built to sit on top of Mapbox GL, where if you need high performance rendering of points or other visualizations that involve just a lot of data, you can incorporate that and still get the benefits of an ordinary base map. And Deck.gl has evolved with contributions from a number of different companies, including Google and Cardo. So it now works with Mapbox GL, MapLibre, and the Google Maps platform as well. So it can sit on top of those and share the GL context, and you get high performance rendering for that huge volume of data. That is part of the VisGL project within the OpenJS Foundation, under the Linux Foundation, and that's something else that we just recently joined because we want to help MapLibre and Deck.gl work more closely together.
And on the performance side of it, what's interesting to you, Tarus, about what we're seeing in the community?
Just the fact that, so I sit in on these calls and they're way over my head.
Yeah.
I mean, I got my first computer. It was a TRS-80 back in 1978. So so I programmed for a little bit, but watching modern processes just kind of is way over my head. But the fact that everyone's very, very excited on moving this forward, and it's driven not by someone sitting around a boardroom table trying to come up with a marketing plan. It's driven by real needs. Like, people are sitting there, I have a real need for this improvement. I have a real need for this. And they're like, well, how can we address it? And like Seth had talked about, there's technologies where, in the data world, we talk about ETL or no ETL, where you can use data directly without having to change it. Without having to do that conversion, it's obviously going to be more performant. And to see these big brains sit around and talk about all the different options and then go off and make it happen. I mean, I'm in a lot of places where they talk about what we should do. It's been rare, and MapLibre is one of the few projects that I've been involved with where you can just see people, okay, I'll go off and do that. And then the next month you have a call and it's there.
Yeah.
So that's what tickles me.
Or in some cases, like there's a multi-month initiative going on right now on native to try and move more and more things onto the GPU. We're finding that not only is the CPU bottlenecked because it's running on a single thread, they're actually seeing a lot of battery life improvements by moving things onto the GPU.
Oh, really? Why the battery life improvements?
Just because the GPUs are designed to do the types of operations that are needed for graphics and can do it in a very parallelized way.
Okay.
So you can burn probably the same number of CPU cycles, but in specialized hardware that's designed to do that.
Well, I've had so much fun hearing these stories about MapLibre. Is there anything else y'all would like to add before we go?
I think that's about it. It's been a really great project to be part of, and I really enjoy the community. I love that the origin story for our first maintainer, Oliver, was that he got involved because he operates a hot air balloon business and wanted to be able to show where he'd been. So just like that's something that kind of reoccurs throughout the geo world. You've got people that are just coming to it from all sorts of different perspectives and sitting down with them and going for a hike, things like that. And like the MapLibre community is really no exception to that. It's a really phenomenal community to be part of.
And I like to end these things with a call to action. So what I would like to do is tell people, go to maplibre.org and poke around. There's a section, there's a very, very good documentation on both the JavaScript side and the native side. When you get to like the examples page, one of the problems I had as a newbie was they're not organized they're alphabetized basically. So if you wanted to display a map, it happens to be way down at the bottom. So the first example would be how to display a map, and it's literally 5 lines, 6 lines of code. It's very, very easy to display a map, but they start off with like 3D terrain extrusion of buildings as an example, and it's way over my head. So if you do decide to go to maplibre.org and start poking around, be a little patient with the documentation and just scroll around until you find something that sounds like, oh, this is a good start. Because I started with displaying a map, and then I was like, okay, put a marker on a map. Okay, change the tiles I'm using on a map and those kind of things. And all I had to do was read the documentation. It was really straightforward.
Well, thank you both for your time. Appreciate it, and good luck with MapLibre.
Thanks for having us. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.